This is wrestling's greatest moments.
Hey now, wrestling fans. It's time for another episode of Wrestling's Greatest Moments. Pro wrestling has had some impressive big men. Sit back as Wrestling's Greatest Moments looks at wrestling's best big men, Part 2. Before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. Criteria. Being a big man isn't always about height. Big men can include short but stout super heavyweights like Jerry Blackwell, or traditional big men like Big John Studd. Remember that these two videos aren't exhaustive, and more are coming, including a special video on the 8th wonder of the world. Bruiser Brody. Sir Winston Churchill's famous description of the Soviet Union as a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma could easily have applied to wrestling's Bruiser Brody. For some, Brody was a folk hero. To others, he was an unreliable, if not untrustworthy wrestler. His refusal to tolerate promoters' underhanded tactics, including suspect payoffs and outright lies, resulted in him frequently walking out on promotions. Nonetheless, his incredible talents and drawing ability meant he was never at a loss for work, and he remains one of wrestling's most celebrated performers. Frank Goodish was born on June 18, 1946, and grew into an impressive physical specimen. According to the biography, Brody, Frank Goodish's first love was football. Brody played at West Texas State, where he went to school with Dusty Rhodes. Unfortunately, Goodish's football aspirations didn't pan out, despite efforts to break through in the NFL, CFL, and later in the minor league football promotions. Goodish's initial experience with wrestling was anything but smooth. As told in the book Brody, Frank's start in the business was rough and controversial. His first trainer, Joe Blanchard, didn't like him and didn't want him. He soon found a mentor and lifelong friend in Dallas, Texas, Fritz Von Erich. Fritz not only gave Goodish a chance in his promotion, but he sent Goodish all over the world to learn and perfect his craft. Von Erich debuted Goodish in his big-time wrestling promotion with a classic fan in the stands angle. Wrestler Bob Roop issued a $5,000 challenge to anyone who could last 10 minutes in the ring with him. Goodish accepted and wrestled in the Lights Out match in April 1974, losing to Roop but impressing the veteran. He had a great body. He was very impressive looking, and he was much bigger when he started than when he died. He was thicker, and his legs were enormous. I really don't remember much about the match itself. You know what? The fact that I don't remember the match means that he was very, very good. I remember the bad matches. I was also young and in shape, and I knew he wasn't going to try and hurt me. Brody learned quickly and began working in other territories. A program in the WWF featured Brody challenging Bruno Sammartino for the WWF Championship. Sammartino recalls working with the young star and the request Brody made, a request that showed Brody's already astute knowledge of the business. Another opponent that I had was Bruiser Brody. He was a big guy who hadn't yet made a huge name for himself, but I enjoyed wrestling him. I remember that I was going to wrestle him in Madison Square Garden, but I don't remember what we were originally going to do in that match. He requested that we do something different, something that would protect him more than me just beating him in the middle of the ring. It was important to him because he hoped to come. Bruiser competed in many promotions, including the American Wrestling Association, Central States Wrestling, Championship Wrestling from Florida, and Southwest Championship Wrestling. However, it was in All Japan Pro Wrestling that he achieved superstardom. There, he held the prestigious NWA International Heavyweight Championship 3 times. Brody also excelled in the promotion's tag team division, capturing its Pacific Wrestling Federation Tag Team Championship with Stan Hansen, and winning the 1981 and 1983 World's Strongest Tag Determination League with Jimmy Snuka and later Stan Hansen. Brody played to a different tune. In his memoir, Inside Out, wrestler and Georgia Championship Wrestling booker Ole Anderson writes, "I brought Bruiser Brody into Atlanta. He was a guy unto himself. He came out to do an interview with a light bulb in his mouth. I asked him, what the hell is that supposed to be about? Well, the people think I'm crazy," he answered. "No, they don't," I corrected him. "The people think you're nuts. Not desperate nuts, mean nuts, or I'm gonna kill somebody nuts. Just goofy. Get the light bulb out of your face and don't do it again." Now, there are many stories of Bruiser Brody that show his complex nature. When Brody went to work in the AWA, he had no problem wrestling as King Kong Brody since veteran Dick the Bruiser had been in the promotion for years. However, that didn't stop the two from working a match over the rights to the name. At the same time, when Dick the Bruiser, who also operated the WWA promotion, was allegedly stingy with a payout, Brody allegedly had a backstage dust-up with him. It took only a few angry words before the two bruisers were battling each other. Frank cracked Dick's head open, knocking him goofy, and a row of lockers was demolished before the situation could be diffused. The matter was resolved, as wrestling lore has it that Dick the Bruiser later handed Brody a check to square things out, and both men were satisfied. Brody's account of the scrap reinforces the idea that he was not one to be trifled with, whether it was fellow wrestlers or promoters. I'll fight for what I got coming. Dick was the same way. He had to have been 50 years old when we had that fight. Brother, did he battle. He must have been something when he was 30. We had an argument, we settled it, and that was that. There's no question that Brody was wary of promoters, often parting ways with them for good if he felt they had or wanted to take advantage of him. Nonetheless, there were also promoters Brody seemed to trust, although trust may be too strong of a word. Two come to mind: Sam Muchnick, who promoted the NWA St. Louis Wrestling Club, and World Class Championship Wrestling's Fritz von Erich. Brody was more than someone who defied promoters. He was a phenomenon in the ring. Standing 6'4" and often tipping the scales at 300 pounds, he was a sight to behold. Brody was considered one of wrestling's best brawlers, known for his wild matches that often spilled out of the ring. At the same time, he could also work with wrestling's technicians. For example, Brody battled Nature Boy Ric Flair to a 60-minute draw in St. Louis. Although his career ended prematurely, Brody's legacy was undeniable. Brody's longtime tag team partner in Japan, Stan Hansen, believes he and Brody changed the industry in Japan. Brody and I, as we went over there, we just went out and kicked butt until they stopped us, and they weren't used to that, I don't think. And that basically changed the style of wrestling in Japan, because they had to fight back. They did fight back, and it's really evolved greatly for Japanese wrestling. Like many of the wrestlers on our list, Brody defied the conventions of big men at the time. He possessed tremendous speed and wasn't afraid to use it. At the same time, he was a shrewd businessperson who understood the industry and his value to it. Some might label him a mercenary regarding promoters, while others might call him a pragmatist. Bruiser Brody's life was tragically cut short on July 16, 1988, while working a World Wrestling Council event in Puerto Rico. Brody was called into the shower by wrestler and booker Jose Gonzalez, aka Invader 1. According to the wrestler Tony Atlas, the shower was often used as a place to discuss match finishes and other business. Tony Atlas recalls what happened that dreadful day. In a few minutes, we heard the sound of scuffling, and then we heard, "Urgh!" It was loud enough that everyone in the dressing room stopped what they were doing and turned towards the shower. And then, more loudly, "Urgh!" When I heard it the second time, I ran to the shower and opened the door. Carlos was right beside me. That's when I saw Brody. He was bent over, holding his stomach. When I looked up, I saw Jose with a knife in his hand, as if he was getting ready to cut Brody. I grabbed Brody and pulled him back by the waist. As I did, Jovica shot in front of me, grabbed Jose, and pinned him against the wall. Then Brody looked up at me and said, "Brother, I'm hurt." There are many more details to Bruiser Brody's death that we'll cover in a future video. However, more than a few fans and wrestlers believe Bruiser Brody's killer, who was acquitted at trial, got away with murder. Whether it was witnesses receiving their subpoenas to testify after the trial concluded or other irregularities, the killer's story that he acted in self-defense is difficult to believe. What's not difficult to believe are Bruiser's contributions to wrestling. Vader. Leon White went from the mean streets of Compton, California to the NFL and later professional wrestling. Incredibly strong and a proven athlete, White parlayed these skills into a phenomenally successful pro wrestling career that spanned the globe. White used a football scholarship to escape the dangerous life he'd watched too many friends and schoolmates fall into. Football allowed him to use his size and power for something positive. The Los Angeles Rams drafted White, and while an injury sidelined him when the Rams made it to Super Bowl 14, he earned an NFC Championship ring and a runners-up ring. AWA promoter Vern Gagne, who always prized potential wrestlers with real-world athletic experience, recruited White. Although White was initially dismissive of pro wrestling, his trainer Brad Rangis quickly taught him respect, and White gave it his all to master his new profession. Fans wondering where Vader earned a reputation as a stiff worker need look no further than his early years in the AWA, where he regularly faced Wildman Bruiser Brody. As Vader tells it in his memoir, Vader Time, "The beatings I took from Bruiser Brody made me further believe that most of the moves were supposed to be stiff. The way he hit me made me think that aside from the characters and personas, the wrestling part was real." Vern Gagne also had White work against Stan Hansen and Jerry Blackwell, two men known for delivering potatoes to opponents. This, combined with his later years in Japan, explains why a match with Leon was always a grueling experience. Despite some arduous years early on, White persevered, improving in the ring and catching the attention of fellow wrestlers, which led to some fantastic opportunities. One opportunity arose when German wrestler Otto Wanz, who competed in the AWA, invited Vader to compete in his Catch Wrestling Association promotion. Wanz put the promotion's top prize on White, a sign of how much he saw in him. After working in Germany, Vader found his career options flourishing. While the AWA was in rough shape, AWA talent Mr. Saito recommended Vader to New Japan Pro Wrestling promoter Antonio Inoki. The wrestler and promoter wanted to create a new heel to dominate his promotion and boost business. Wrestling legend has it that Inoki considered Sid Vicious, the Ultimate Warrior, and Leon White to play his creation, Van Vader, a mysterious wrestler based on a legendary Japanese warrior. Inoki paid for an elaborate entrance, which included a sinister-looking helmet that shot out steam. Inoki crafted an epic debut for Vader by having his new creation annihilate him after Inoki worked a grueling match against Riki Tozu. Vader made a grand entrance, challenging Inoki to face him then and there. Never one to back down, Inoki accepted the challenge. It proved one-sided as Vader destroyed Inoki, delivering one stiff blow after another that looked like Inoki was fighting for his life. In some ways, it was because Inoki had told Vader to hold nothing back. It paid off, with the fans in the Tokyo Dome setting their seat cushions on fire and hurling them at Vader. Consequently, New Japan was banned from the Tokyo Dome for 2 years. It didn't matter, as New Japan posted sellout after sellout. Van Vader attained unprecedented heights in Japan with his work and look. According to Japanese wrestling analyst Zach Arnold, he revolutionized what people thought of a monster heavyweight wrestler. He elevated the standards of what it meant to be an agile giant who could make fans believe that he could destroy everyone. Every promotion wanted a piece of Vader. Vader captured titles not only in Japan, but around the world. Returning to North America led to a World Championship in Mexico and a lucrative win in World Championship Wrestling. There, Vader destroyed opponent after opponent. Eventually, Vader won the WCW World Championship 3 times. Vader feuded with talent, including Sting, Cactus Jack, and Nature Boy Ric Flair, winning over more fans. WCW's changing landscape, including Eric Bischoff's rise to power and Hulk Hogan's jump to WCW, put the brakes on Vader's push. Injuries also slowed him down, and depending on who you ask, a backstage fight with Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff led to WCW releasing Vader. Although the WWF brought Vader in, a premature return from shoulder surgery and backstage clashes with the Clique turned his WWF run into a disappointment. Many fans and observers feel the WWF left money on the table by failing to utilize him properly, much as they'd done with Bam Bam Bigelow. Vader's career continued into the 21st century, including campaigns in All Japan Pro Wrestling Noah, occasional appearances in TNA Wrestling, and the indie scene. Personal demons, along with health problems, slowed him down as his body suffered the consequences of decades of pushing his body in the ring. Diagnosed with congestive heart failure in 2016, Vader died in June of 2018 at age 63. Earthquake. John Tenta is one of several sumo wrestlers who successfully transitioned into professional wrestling. The future monster heel was born in 1963 in the Canadian province of British Columbia. Tenta looked up to fellow Canadian wrestlers such as Gene Kiniski and Don Leo Jonathan, dreaming of becoming a wrestler. A successful wrestler in high school, Tenta earned a scholarship at Louisiana State University. Unfortunately, the school cut its wrestling program. This didn't slow him down for long, as a sumo wrestler met him in Vancouver and invited him to compete in sumo. Although John became a sumo wrestler at a late age of 22 years old, his 6'5", 423-pound frame and amateur wrestling background helped him adapt quickly. John went undefeated in his rookie year, earning the nicknames the Heavenly Mountain Harp and the Canadian Comet. However, Tenta opted to retire from competition, noting how hard it was on his body. Despite criticism from some members of the sumo world, Tenta departed, signing with Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling. Tenta's size and sumo background made him a top prospect, and soon the WWF came calling. The WWF introduced Tenta on TV when Dino Bravo challenged the Ultimate Warrior to a test of strength. This was a setup as the big man attacked the Warrior, quickly becoming infamous as Earthquake. Earthquake feuded with the Ultimate Warrior, but his biggest feud lay ahead. After the Ultimate Warrior defeated Hulk Hogan for the WWF Championship, the WWF wanted to utilize Hogan as its Babe Ruth of wrestling, a special attraction that could headline any show without holding a championship. Earthquake attacked Hogan during an episode of the Brother Love Show, laying him out with a kayfabe injury angle that jeopardized the Hulkster's career. To no one's surprise, Hogan recovered and battled Earthquake at 1990's SummerSlam, defeating him by countout. Their feud continued into Survivor Series and wrapped up at 1991's Royal Rumble when Hulk Hogan eliminated him. While Earthquake's WWF career never hit the main event again, the promotion protected him and put him into upper-card programs such as his feud with Jake the Snake Roberts. This feud saw Earthquake supposedly crush Jake's snake, Damien, then serve him up as Quake Burgers to the unsuspecting hosts of Primetime Wrestling. Earthquake captured his first and only WWF title when he teamed with Typhoon, aka former babyface Tugboat, winning the WWF Tag Team Championship. The Disasters turned babyface, feuding with Money Inc., but Quake's push was fading. A subsequent run in WCW never amounted to anything significant. WCW's attempt to repackage Earthquake failed when they renamed him the Avalanche, only for the WWF to threaten legal action. Tenta later became the Shark, joining the Dungeon of Doom as WCW recycled several of Hulk Hogan's WWF feuds. John Tenta returned to the WWF, working in the oddities as the Masked Golga. Reportedly, Tenta had lost so much weight that the WWE felt his Earthquake gimmick couldn't work. Tenta left the WWF in 1999, returning for WrestleMania X7's Gimmick Battle Royale. John Tenta died in June 2006 at the age of 42 after battling bladder cancer. So what wrestling big men do you remember? Would you like to see an in-depth look at one or more of these wrestlers' lives? Share your thoughts in the comments section and let us know if there are any videos you'd like wrestling's greatest moments to cover. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel, follow us on X and Instagram, and spread the good news about wrestling's greatest moments, the channel that celebrates the squared circle.